You think the world wars are over? Think again. Hidden alliances, shadowy figures, and nations on the brink of oblivion. Are you ready to uncover a conspiracy that reaches the highest echelons of power? Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single revelation. So you're ready to dive into the murky waters of the Antichrist myth? Let's start at the beginning. The idea of a powerful, deceptive figure opposing God isn't new. It's woven into the fabric of many religions and mythologies, predating Christianity by centuries. Think about ancient prophecies, figures of rebellion against divine order, and the constant struggle between good and evil. These ancient narratives laid the groundwork for the Antichrist concept as we understand it today. The Book of Revelation, a cornerstone of Christian eschatology, significantly shaped the modern Antichrist image. It depicts a powerful figure who deceives the world and wages war against God. Remember, though, interpretations of this text have varied wildly throughout history. What one person saw as a literal Antichrist, another might interpret as a symbolic representation of worldly powers or corrupt ideologies. Over the centuries, different figures and events have been associated with the Antichrist prophecy. From historical rulers to political movements, the interpretation has been fluid and often reflective of the anxieties and fears of the time. This malleability is key to understanding how the myth has persisted and evolved. It's a blank canvas onto which people project their deepest concerns about power, deception, and the future. So you see, the seeds of this conspiracy theory are deeply rooted in historical interpretations and anxieties. So where do these prophecies come from? You've heard of the Book of Revelation, right? Its cryptic imagery has fueled countless interpretations, linking events like world wars and technological advancements to the Antichrist's rise. Think about the descriptions of a global leader, a beast rising from the sea and the mark of the beast. How might these translate to our modern world? It's a fascinating and sometimes terrifying puzzle. Beyond Revelation, other biblical passages hint at a future dominated by a powerful, deceptive figure. Daniel's prophecies, for instance, speak of kingdoms rising and falling, leading to a final confrontation. Historians have spent centuries trying to decipher these passages, linking them to historical events and figures. Some even argue that specific world leaders throughout history fulfill aspects of these ancient predictions. But remember, you're dealing with interpretations. Different scholars, different beliefs, different conclusions. The beauty of it, and the challenge, lies in the ambiguity. These prophecies are open to debate, and that's what makes them so endlessly captivating. It's up to you to decide what you believe, to sift through the evidence, and to form your own understanding of these ancient warnings. So let's talk about power. Think about the post-war world, the ashes of empires still smoldering. From the ruins, new giants rose. The United States, with its booming economy and military might, quickly became a global superpower. You saw the Marshall Plan, the creation of NATO, all moves to shape the world in its image. But it wasn't a solo act. The Soviet Union, a communist behemoth, emerged as a powerful counterweight, locked in an ideological struggle that defined the era. This Cold War rivalry shaped alliances, fueled proxy conflicts, and cast a long shadow over the globe. But the world isn't just about two players. Other nations, too, began to flex their muscles. China, recovering from years of turmoil, embarked on a path of rapid economic growth, transforming itself into a global economic powerhouse. You saw their influence spread through trade deals and infrastructure projects across continents. Meanwhile, nations in Europe, having rebuilt after the devastation of war, forged closer ties, ultimately creating the European Union, a powerful economic and political bloc. These shifting power dynamics fundamentally reshaped the global landscape. These shifts weren't just about economics and military strength. They involved cultural influence, too. The spread of American popular culture, from Hollywood movies to rock and roll music, captivated the world. This cultural exchange, however, wasn't one-sided. You saw a growing awareness and appreciation of diverse cultures, leading to a more interconnected world. But with this interconnectedness came new challenges, new forms of conflict, and new questions about the future balance of global power. It's a complex story, one that continues to unfold before our eyes. But you know, the Cold War wasn't just about bombs and ideologies. It was also a battle for hearts and minds, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and religious prophecy. Think about it. The looming threat of nuclear annihilation, the rise of totalitarian regimes. It all felt eerily familiar to those who'd studied the Book of Revelation. Suddenly, those cryptic prophecies about a world-ending figure, the Antichrist, seemed less metaphorical and more imminent. For some, the Soviet Union, with its atheistic ideology and expansionist ambitions, became the embodiment of this evil force. Stalin, with his ruthless power and totalitarian control, was seen by many as a potential candidate for the Antichrist. His image, plastered across propaganda posters, became a symbol of the fear gripping the West. It was a potent blend of political reality and religious interpretation, fueling the anxieties of the time. Others pointed to different figures, different events. The rise of fascism in Europe, the horrors of the Holocaust, the very real threat of global conflict. These were all interpreted through the lens of apocalyptic prophecy. The Antichrist wasn't just a singular person. He became a symbol of the evils of the 20th century, a representation of the terrifying power of unchecked human ambition and cruelty. Each new crisis seemed to bring the prophecy closer to fulfillment in the minds of many. So you're thinking about the Antichrist, right? Let's rewind a bit. The Crusades, you've probably heard of them, these massive religious wars. But did you ever consider how they fueled interpretations of the Antichrist? The idea of a holy war fighting for God easily lends itself to apocalyptic thinking. The enemy becomes not just a political foe but a force of evil, a harbinger of the end times. Think about the rhetoric used, the language of righteousness versus demonic forces, the promises of divine intervention. The political motivations behind the Crusades were complex, of course. Land, power, wealth. These were all major factors, but the religious fervor provided the crucial justification. The image of the Muslim world as a bastion of anti-Christian influence, a direct threat to Christendom. It's neatly into existing apocalyptic prophecies. This narrative painted the infidel as a potential agent of the Antichrist, further solidifying the religious and political goals of the campaign. The bloodshed and brutality of the Crusades, the immense suffering on both sides, only served to amplify these interpretations. The scale of the conflict, the sheer number of lives lost, fueled the idea of a world teetering on the brink of apocalypse. And within this context, the figure of the Antichrist, a powerful evil entity orchestrating global conflict, became a compelling explanation for the chaos unfolding across the medieval world. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? So, the Crusades, a bloody chapter, right? But the Reformation, that shook things up even more. Suddenly you had different interpretations of the Bible, different churches, different ideas about power and authority. This splintering of religious belief directly impacted how people understood prophecies about the Antichrist. No longer was there a single unified interpretation dictated by the Pope. Some Protestant reformers saw the Antichrist as a symbol of papal tyranny, a figure representing the corrupting influence of the Catholic Church. Others focused on secular rulers, seeing them as potential embodiments of Antichrist's power. The rise of powerful nation-states also influenced how people interpreted the prophecies. Suddenly, the Antichrist wasn't just a religious figure. He could be a political one too. This fragmentation of belief meant that interpretations of the Antichrist became incredibly varied and often contradictory. What was once a relatively unified understanding, largely controlled by the Catholic Church, became a battlefield of ideas. Each group, each denomination had its own take on who or what the Antichrist might be. This made predicting or identifying him even more difficult, and even today, the debate continues. So the Reformation threw a wrench in the works, didn't it? But then came the Enlightenment, a period of reason and questioning everything, even the established religious dogma. You see, this emphasis on logic and scientific inquiry started chipping away at the traditional interpretations of prophecy, including those surrounding the Antichrist. Suddenly, literal interpretations were challenged. Were these prophecies meant to be taken literally, or were they symbolic representations of broader historical and societal conflicts? The focus shifted. Instead of focusing solely on religious interpretations, people started looking at societal structures and power dynamics. The Antichrist, once a purely religious figure, began to be viewed as a metaphor for tyranny, oppression, or even the corrupting influence of unchecked power. This new perspective opened up a whole new range of interpretations, moving away from the strictly religious and into the political and social realms. Think about it. The Enlightenment's emphasis on individual liberty and self-determination directly challenged the idea of a single, all-powerful figure controlling humanity's destiny. This shift in perspective fundamentally altered how people understood and interpreted prophecies about the Antichrist. It became less about a singular supernatural entity and more about the very real dangers of unchecked power and the importance of vigilance against authoritarianism. For you, this meant a broadening of the understanding, away from the purely theological. So the Enlightenment paved the way for a new way of thinking. But then came the unimaginable horrors of 2 world wars. You saw firsthand the devastation, the sheer scale of human suffering, and the utter breakdown of civilization. This wasn't just about political ideologies clashing. It felt like something ancient and primal was at play, something apocalyptic. The prophecies suddenly felt a lot less abstract, didn't they? The scale of death and destruction fueled a sense of impending doom, a feeling that the end of the world might actually be near. Suddenly the old religious texts, with their warnings of end times and divine judgment, seemed less like fairy tales and more like chillingly accurate predictions. The sheer scale of death and destruction, millions upon millions of lives lost, was unprecedented. For many it felt like a sign, a clear indication that the world was teetering on the brink of something catastrophic, something beyond human comprehension. The lines between good and evil blurred, and the world felt more chaotic and uncertain than ever before. This widespread sense of unease and fear created fertile ground for apocalyptic interpretations. The rise of extremist ideologies fueled by this despair and disillusionment further cemented this belief. You see, the world felt broken, and many people desperately searched for answers, for explanations that went beyond the mundane. And in that desperation, the idea of a powerful, malevolent force orchestrating global events, an Antichrist figure, became increasingly appealing to some. So the sheer brutality of those wars fueled a potent brew of apocalyptic anxieties. You had the rise of nuclear weapons, a terrifying new power capable of global annihilation. This chilling possibility seeped into the cultural consciousness, shaping not just political strategies but also deeply held religious beliefs. The Cold War wasn't just a geopolitical struggle. It was a battle of ideologies, each side seeing the other as a force of ultimate evil, a harbinger of the apocalypse. Think about it. The constant threat of nuclear war, the propaganda portraying the enemy as demonic, the pervasive sense of impending doom. For many, these weren't abstract political concerns, they were signs of the end times. Religious interpretations of the Cold War were widespread, with various groups seeing the conflict as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, a battle between good and evil on a global scale. This fear, this palpable sense of impending catastrophe, fueled apocalyptic narratives that resonated deeply with millions. These narratives often positioned one superpower or the other as the Antichrist's earthly agent, a force of global destruction poised to usher in the final conflict. The sheer scale of the ideological clash, the potential for unimaginable devastation, and the chilling rhetoric employed by both sides, all contributed to a climate of fear and uncertainty that fueled apocalyptic interpretations. You can see how easily the Cold War's anxieties could intertwine with pre-existing religious beliefs, creating potent and disturbing visions of the future. So how do these anxieties manifest today? You see, the Antichrist figure, once largely confined to religious interpretations, has seeped into popular culture in fascinating ways. Think about it. Powerful global leaders, charismatic figures wielding immense influence. These are modern echoes of the ancient prophecy. It's not necessarily about a literal devil, but about the embodiment of unchecked power and the potential for catastrophic misuse of authority. Some interpret the Antichrist as a symbol of technological advancement gone wrong. Artificial intelligence surpassing human control, or a global surveillance system that erodes individual liberty. Others see it in the rise of global corporations wielding economic power that rivals nation-states, shaping global events through their decisions. The key is the concentration of power, the potential for unchecked influence over the lives of billions. You might even argue that the very concept of the Antichrist is a reflection of our own anxieties about power, control, and the potential for human destruction. It's a projection of our fears onto a symbolic figure, a way of grappling with the immense challenges and uncertainties of the modern world. It's a warning, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of ethical considerations in the face of immense power. So, you're thinking about the Antichrist, right? But what if the real horror isn't some single charismatic figure, but something far more insidious? Think about the rise of extreme nationalism after World War II. The intense focus on one's own nation, often at the expense of others, echoes the kind of exclusionary thinking found in many apocalyptic prophecies. It's the us versus them mentality amplified to a global scale where the them is demonized, making it easier to justify extreme actions. This isn't just about isolated incidents, it's about a systematic erosion of empathy and global cooperation. Imagine a world where nationalism becomes so extreme that international alliances crumble, leaving nations isolated and vulnerable. This fractured world, ripe for conflict and distrust, could easily be interpreted as the prelude to a catastrophic event, a scenario often portrayed in apocalyptic literature. You see how easily this could be spun into a narrative of good versus evil, with one nation or ideology positioned as the ultimate savior against the forces of chaos. Think about the rhetoric used, the demonization of outsiders, the promises of national purity and strength. This kind of language is dangerously similar to the rhetoric used to justify violence and oppression throughout history. In apocalyptic narratives, this often becomes the groundwork for the rise of a tyrannical figure, a leader who exploits nationalistic fervor to consolidate power and usher in a new world order. This isn't about predicting the future, but rather about understanding the dangerous potential inherent in unchecked nationalism. So we're talking about a global conspiracy, right? And you might be surprised how often religion plays a key role. Think about it. Prophecies, end times, chosen peoples, these are powerful ideas that can easily be twisted to fit any narrative. Conspiracy theorists often use religious texts to support their claims, cherry-picking verses and reinterpreting them to fit their preconceived notions of a hidden agenda. It's a potent cocktail. The weight of religious belief mixed with the thrill of uncovering a secret truth. This isn't about faith itself, you understand. It's about the manipulation of faith. Some conspiracies use religious language to create a sense of urgency and fear, playing on people's deepest anxieties about the afterlife and the fate of the world. Others exploit the inherent trust many people have in religious leaders or institutions, using them as conduits for disinformation. It's a complex dance between genuine belief, deliberate deception, and everything in between. You see, the power of religion in conspiracy theories lies in its ability to provide a framework for understanding the seemingly inexplicable. When faced with events that defy easy explanation, people often turn to established belief systems, even if those systems are being misrepresented or exploited. This is where the danger lies, the potential for radicalization and harmful actions based on misinterpreted religious teachings and fabricated conspiracies. It's crucial to be critical and discerning, to examine the evidence independently, and to avoid letting fear or faith blind you to the truth. So we've touched on religion's role, but let's talk about something equally powerful: propaganda. Think about how easily information can be twisted, how carefully crafted narratives can sway your beliefs. You see, conspiracy theories thrive on this. The deliberate dissemination of misinformation designed to create doubt and fear. It's not just about lies, you see. It's about carefully shaping the narrative to fit a predetermined conclusion. Consider the power of repeated messaging. A lie repeated often enough starts to sound like the truth, right? Propaganda masters understand this perfectly. They use subtle techniques, emotionally charged language, and carefully selected images to manipulate your emotions and cloud your judgment. They prey on your fears and insecurities, whispering doubts into your ear, making you question everything you thought you knew. And it's not just about overt manipulation. Sometimes the most effective propaganda is subtle. It's the omission of crucial information, the carefully chosen words that paint a biased picture, the selective highlighting of facts that support a particular narrative, while ignoring contradictory evidence. It's about creating an echo chamber, where only certain viewpoints are amplified, reinforcing pre-existing biases and making alternative perspectives seem unthinkable. So we've seen how propaganda twists the truth. Now let's consider who might be seen as potential allies of this shadowy figure. Historically, you could point to powerful nations who've engaged in morally questionable actions fueled by greed or a thirst for power. Think about the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. The chilling efficiency of their propaganda machines, the suppression of dissent. Were these merely coincidences or something more sinister? You decide. Looking at the present day, you might consider certain global powers whose actions sometimes seem to prioritize self-interest over global cooperation. The pursuit of economic dominance, the disregard for human rights in certain situations. These actions, viewed through a certain lens, could be interpreted as serving a larger, more nefarious agenda. Remember, we're exploring a conspiracy theory here. It's crucial to maintain a critical mindset. But it's worth considering these parallels. Ultimately, identifying potential allies is a subjective exercise. It's about interpreting events and actions through a specific framework, a lens shaped by the conspiracy theory itself. You're encouraged to research these historical and contemporary events yourself, to draw your own conclusions. Remember, critical thinking is your best weapon against misinformation regardless of the source. So you're thinking about powerful nations and shadowy figures. But how do we even know about these things? The media, my friend, plays a huge role. Think about it. The stories we hear, the images we see, they all shape our understanding of the world. A carefully crafted narrative, even if partially true, can build a compelling case for almost anything, especially when fear and uncertainty are involved. Consider how easily a single biased report can influence public opinion. A carefully selected quote, an image out of context. These small details can be manipulated to build a narrative that fits a predetermined agenda. And once that narrative takes root, it's incredibly difficult to uproot it, even with contradictory evidence. The internet, of course, has amplified this effect tenfold. False information spreads like wildfire, often faster and more effectively than the truth. Algorithms designed to keep you engaged often prioritize sensationalism over accuracy, creating echo chambers where pre-existing biases are reinforced and alternative perspectives are actively suppressed. You need to be critical of everything you see online. So we've talked about media manipulation, but what about the actual events? Let's look at some historical disappearances, or at least dramatic shifts in power. Think about the Ottoman Empire, a once mighty force reduced to a shadow of its former self. Its collapse wasn't a sudden vanishing act, but a gradual decline fueled by internal strife and external pressures. You see the same pattern repeated throughout history. Empires rise and fall, nations transform, sometimes beyond recognition. Consider the impact of World War II. The map of Europe was redrawn, borders shifted, and some nations ceased to exist in their previous forms. Poland, for example, faced occupation and a brutal reshaping of its identity. This wasn't a conspiracy in the traditional sense, but a geopolitical earthquake that dramatically altered the global landscape and the fate of countless individuals. It's a reminder that even without secret cabals, immense changes can occur that seem almost like a disappearance. Then you have the Cold War, a period of intense geopolitical tension that saw the rise and fall of various regimes, some vanishing almost completely behind the Iron Curtain. The Soviet Union itself, a superpower, ultimately dissolved, its constituent republics gaining independence. These weren't necessarily disappearances, but profound transformations demonstrating how quickly a world power can crumble under internal pressures and changing global dynamics. It's a complex picture, isn't it? So the Ottoman Empire's fall wasn't just about military might, you see. Think about the economic pressures, the rise of industrial powers in Europe, their access to resources and advanced manufacturing created a massive economic imbalance. The Ottomans, with their largely agrarian economy, simply couldn't compete. This economic weakness made them vulnerable, paving the way for their eventual dissolution. It's a pattern you'll see repeated throughout history. Consider the post-war Bretton Woods system. It established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, giving America immense economic leverage. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, access to credit, trade agreements. These became tools of influence, shaping global politics. You see how economic power translates directly into geopolitical dominance? Now, think about the oil shocks of the 1970s. Suddenly, nations heavily reliant on imported oil found themselves at the mercy of OPEC. This demonstrated the vulnerability of even powerful nations to sudden shifts in global commodity markets. Economic dependence, you see, can be a significant factor in shaping geopolitical alliances and, in extreme cases, even national survival. It's all interconnected. So the economic shifts we discussed laid the groundwork for something far more sinister. Imagine a world where unseen forces manipulate global events, pushing nations towards conflict. You're looking at a chessboard not just of countries but of competing ideologies and hidden agendas, all playing into a larger, terrifying game. This isn't about simple territorial disputes, it's about control, about who dictates the future. Think about the Cold War, the proxy conflicts, the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Was that truly just about communism versus capitalism? Or was it a carefully orchestrated dance distracting you from something far more significant happening beneath the surface? You might be surprised at the alliances formed and the betrayals orchestrated, all for a far greater purpose. Now, picture a future where certain nations weakened by internal strife or manipulated through economic pressure simply vanish. Not in a fiery explosion, but a slow, insidious decline. Their influence erodes, their resources are plundered, and they become footnotes in history. You might not even notice until it's too late. This isn't about natural disasters or simple economic collapse. It's about deliberate actions, a chess game played on a global scale, you see. The post-war boom wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about control. Think about the rapid advancement of communication technologies. The telephone, radio, then television. These weren't just tools, they were weapons of influence, shaping public opinion on a scale never before imagined. Suddenly, entire populations could be swayed with a single broadcast, a carefully crafted message. This ability to manipulate information became a crucial tool for those seeking global power. Then came the computer age, the ability to process and analyze vast amounts of data to predict trends and manipulate markets. It was a game changer. Imagine the power to foresee economic collapses, to engineer financial crises, to profit from the chaos while others suffer. This technological edge allowed a select few to exert unprecedented control over global resources and influence. And now we're in the digital age. The internet, social media, artificial intelligence. These technologies offer even greater potential for manipulation and control. Think about the power to spread disinformation, to sow discord, to influence elections, all with the click of a button. The lines between reality and deception are blurring, and those who control the technology control the narrative. Just imagine, you're constantly bombarded with information, whispers in the dark about hidden agendas and shadowy figures pulling the strings. It starts subtly, a seed of doubt planted in your mind. You start questioning everything, the news, your government, even the people closest to you. This constant suspicion, this feeling of being perpetually deceived can be incredibly isolating and anxiety-inducing. It chips away at your trust, not just in institutions, but in the very fabric of reality as you understand it. This erosion of trust can lead to real-world consequences. You might withdraw from social circles, becoming distrustful of friends and family. You could become hypervigilant, constantly scanning for signs of deception or hidden meanings. In extreme cases, this can manifest as paranoia, even delusion. The line between what's real and what's imagined becomes increasingly blurred, leaving you feeling lost and alone in a world you no longer recognize. Remember, you are not alone in this. Many people grapple with the psychological impact of conspiracy theories. The key is to find a balance, to be critical of information without succumbing to paranoia. Seek out reliable sources, engage in healthy skepticism, and remember that not everything is a hidden plot. Building a support network of trusted individuals can also provide a crucial anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Your mental health is paramount. Don't let fear and suspicion consume you. Now imagine that seed of doubt blossoming into a full-blown conspiracy theory. Fueled by misinformation spread like wildfire through social media and biased news outlets. You see headlines screaming about secret alliances, shadowy figures manipulating global events, and the imminent collapse of civilization. It's easy to get caught up in the drama, to feel like you're in the know, privy to information that the sheeple are blind to. But how do you know what's true? The truth is, misinformation thrives on ambiguity and emotional manipulation. Sensational headlines, emotionally charged language, and the constant barrage of information overload make it difficult to discern fact from fiction. You might find yourself sharing articles without verifying their sources, forwarding chain emails without questioning their authenticity. This is how misinformation spreads, infecting the minds of millions. This isn't just about harmless conspiracy theories. The consequences are far-reaching. Misinformation can erode trust in institutions, polarize society, and even incite violence. Think about the impact on elections, public health crises, and international relations. The constant bombardment of false narratives can lead to confusion, fear, and ultimately a breakdown of social cohesion. You need to be critical. You need to question everything. So you're hearing whispers of a global conspiracy involving powerful nations and a shadowy figure known as the Antichrist. But let's take a step back. Where did this idea even come from? The concept of an Antichrist, a powerful figure opposing Christ, originates in religious texts. But the interpretations and applications of this figure have wildly varied over centuries. You'll find that many modern interpretations are heavily influenced by apocalyptic prophecies and often lack historical or verifiable evidence. Think about it. Who exactly is this Antichrist? Is it a single individual, a system of power, or simply a symbolic representation of evil? The ambiguity allows for incredibly wide interpretations, making it easy to project anxieties and fears onto seemingly unrelated events. You need to critically examine the sources and the motivations behind these claims. Are they based on factual evidence, or are they relying on speculation, misinterpretations, or even outright fabrication? Remember, powerful narratives often exploit existing anxieties and fears. The Antichrist narrative, with its inherent drama and sense of impending doom, taps into those anxieties. This allows for the easy spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories. You have to be aware of this manipulative potential. Don't simply accept claims at face value. Instead, actively seek out diverse perspectives and verifiable evidence before jumping to conclusions. So you've heard the whispers. Powerful nations secretly aligning with, well, the Antichrist. But let's dissect these claims. Many theories point to specific historical events suggesting hidden alliances and manipulations. Take, for example, the post-war era. Some claim certain agreements and organizations formed then were actually fronts for something far more sinister, a clandestine pact with forces far beyond human comprehension. But how much truth is there in these accusations? We'll explore the evidence and analyze its validity. You'll find plenty of speculation online linking various historical figures to this supposed Antichrist conspiracy. But remember, correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because two events happened around the same time doesn't mean they're connected. We need to critically examine the evidence. Did these individuals truly collaborate? Or are we connecting dots that don't actually exist? Is this a case of misinterpretation or deliberate misinformation? Many of these claims rely on interpretations of religious texts and prophecies. While these texts are rich in symbolism and open to various interpretations, we need to be cautious about applying them directly to contemporary political events. Remember, those interpretations can be heavily influenced by bias. The danger here is taking these interpretations as absolute fact without proper scrutiny. Let's explore some of the most common claims and evaluate their historical basis. So nations disappearing? Sounds far-fetched, right? But let's look at the evidence. Some theories suggest subtle shifts in global power, a nation's influence waning to the point of irrelevance on the world stage. Think about it. Economic collapse, internal conflict, or even a gradual loss of cultural identity can effectively erase a nation's presence, even without a physical annihilation. It's a slow fade, a quiet disappearance, leaving behind only echoes of what once was. Then there's the more dramatic scenario. Outright destruction. Wars, of course, can obliterate entire populations and cultures. But even beyond large-scale conflicts, consider natural disasters of unimaginable scale. A catastrophic earthquake, a volcanic eruption, or a tsunami could wipe a nation off the map literally overnight. The impact on the world stage would be immediate and profound, a stark reminder of our planet's power. But what about the less obvious disappearances? Think about cultural assimilation. One nation's customs, language, and traditions might slowly be absorbed by another, leaving little trace of its unique identity. It's a silent takeover, a gradual erosion of a nation's distinct character, until it's essentially indistinguishable from its neighbor. This isn't a sudden vanishing, but a subtle shift in the fabric of society, a slow merging of cultures. So how do we separate the wheat from the chaff? You've heard whispers, seen headlines, maybe even stumbled across some truly wild theories. But remember, evidence and speculation are very different things. Evidence needs to be verifiable, documented, and able to withstand scrutiny. Speculation, on the other hand, is often based on assumptions, incomplete information, or even outright conjecture. It's crucial to approach these claims with a critical eye, questioning the sources and the methods used to arrive at their conclusions. Look for verifiable sources. Did this information come from reputable historians, academics, or journalists? Or did it originate from anonymous online forums or conspiracy websites? Consider the biases of the source. Everyone has a perspective, and understanding that perspective is key to evaluating their claims objectively. Don't let emotional appeals or sensationalism cloud your judgment. Focus on the facts, the evidence, and the logical connections between them. Remember, correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because two events happen at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other. Always look for a clear logical link between the supposed evidence and the conclusion being drawn. And finally, be prepared to change your mind. New information emerges all the time, and it's important to be open to revising your understanding as new evidence comes to light. Be skeptical, be curious, and most importantly, be discerning. So let's talk secret societies. You've heard the names: the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Skull and Bones. These groups, shrouded in secrecy and ritual, have long been central figures in conspiracy theories. Some claim they wield immense power, manipulating global events from the shadows, pulling strings to control governments and economies. Think about it. The level of organization and influence needed to orchestrate such schemes is staggering, right? But how much of this is real and how much is just, well, speculation? It's easy to get caught up in the allure of these theories. The secrecy itself fuels the imagination. The rituals, the symbols, the hidden meanings, they all contribute to a narrative that's both fascinating and frightening. Remember, though, that many of these societies are actually social clubs with philanthropic aims. Their secrecy is often simply a matter of tradition, not malicious intent. The problem is separating fact from fiction when it comes to secret societies is incredibly difficult. The very nature of their secrecy makes unbiased investigation challenging. So, while you might find compelling evidence suggesting covert operations, it's crucial to critically evaluate the sources and consider alternative explanations. Don't let the mystery overwhelm your critical thinking skills. But the influence doesn't stop with secret societies. You see, religious extremism fueled by warped interpretations of faith has been a powerful force shaping global conflict. Think about it. The unwavering belief in a divine mandate, often twisted to justify violence and hatred, has driven countless wars and acts of terror throughout history. This isn't about any particular religion, but about the dangerous potential for extremism within any belief system. From the rise of extremist groups in the Middle East to the sectarian violence we've seen across the globe, the impact is undeniable. These groups often prey on vulnerable populations, exploiting grievances and using religious rhetoric to recruit and radicalize individuals. They create a powerful sense of belonging and purpose, offering a twisted path to salvation that justifies horrific acts. This isn't just about isolated incidents. It's about the larger geopolitical implications. Religious extremism fuels instability, creating breeding grounds for terrorism and undermining efforts to build peace and cooperation. It destabilizes regions, displaces populations, and creates humanitarian crises. It's a complex web of factors. But the role of religious extremism in shaping conflict is undeniable. So where does this leave us? You've seen the shifting alliances, the religious fervor fueling conflict, and the hidden agendas. Now, let's look ahead. Predicting the future is tricky, but certain trends suggest a potential realignment of global power. We might see a rise in multipolarity with several nations vying for influence, rather than the traditional bipolar or unipolar systems. This could lead to a more fragmented world, with alliances shifting constantly. Imagine a world where economic power becomes the primary driver of influence. Think about the growing economies of Asia, particularly China and India. Their economic might could dramatically reshape the global landscape, challenging the established powers. This isn't just about raw economic output. It's about technological innovation and control over vital resources. You could see alliances formed and broken based on access to these resources, leading to unexpected partnerships. But economic power isn't the only factor. Technological advancements, especially in artificial intelligence and biotechnology, will play a crucial role. The nation that controls these technologies could wield immense influence, potentially shaping global politics and even social structures. Think about the ethical implications. Who controls the AI? Who benefits from these advancements? And who is left behind? This could lead to new forms of conflict and competition, unlike anything we've seen before. So let's talk about potential conflicts. Imagine a scenario where a major power, fueled by religious extremism, attempts a global dominance play. You see them consolidating control, manipulating information, and using economic pressure to subdue nations. This isn't just about military might. It's about a meticulously planned campaign of influence and control, a shadow war played out on the world stage. Then there's the possibility of a catastrophic miscalculation. Picture this. Two nuclear-armed nations locked in a bitter territorial dispute accidentally escalate a local conflict into something far, far worse. A single wrong move, a breakdown in communication, a moment of reckless abandon. It could all trigger a global catastrophe. You're talking about an event that could reshape the world as we know it. Or consider a resource war. As essential resources become scarcer, you might see powerful nations clashing over dwindling supplies of oil, water, or rare earth minerals. These conflicts could easily spill over borders, drawing in other nations and escalating into a broader, more devastating global conflict. Imagine the chaos and desperation that would ensue. But what about the international bodies? You'd think the UN, with its peacekeeping forces and Security Council, would be a major player in stopping this kind of thing, right? Well, it's complicated. Ideally, the UN should be a powerful force for diplomacy, preventing conflicts before they escalate. They can impose sanctions, send peacekeepers, and even authorize military intervention in extreme cases. But their effectiveness depends heavily on the cooperation of member states. And that's where things often fall apart. Think about the limitations. The Security Council's veto power, for example, can be used to block actions even when a clear threat exists. And even with a mandate, enforcing peace requires resources and political will, which aren't always available. Plus, the UN's influence is limited by the sovereignty of its member states. They can choose to ignore resolutions if they wish. It's a fragile system, dependent on the cooperation of nations that might have their own agendas. Other international organizations, like the NATO alliance or regional bodies, also play a role. NATO, for instance, focuses on collective defense, deterring aggression through military strength. But even these organizations have their limitations. They are often bound by their own mandates and the interests of their member states. Ultimately, preventing global conflict requires a complex interplay of diplomacy, military might, and international cooperation. A delicate balance that's constantly tested. So you're left wondering, what can be done? Well, effective conflict mitigation isn't about waving a magic wand. It's about proactive diplomacy. Think about early warning systems, spotting potential flashpoints before they erupt into full-blown wars. That means intelligence gathering, analyzing social tensions and understanding the root causes of conflict, things like resource scarcity or historical grievances. Then there's the crucial role of international law. Treaties, agreements, and international courts. These are designed to provide a framework for peaceful dispute resolution. But remember, treaties are only as good as the nations that agree to abide by them. Enforcement is often the biggest challenge. Economic interdependence can also be a powerful force for peace. When countries are economically intertwined through trade and investment, they have a greater incentive to cooperate and avoid conflict. Think about it. War disrupts trade, it hurts everyone involved. But economic sanctions, while sometimes necessary, can also be a double-edged sword. Finally, remember the power of people. Promoting education, fostering understanding between different cultures, and empowering civil society are all long-term strategies that can help build more peaceful and resilient societies. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but these actions lay the groundwork for a more stable future. It requires constant vigilance and a commitment to diplomacy. So what have we learned? You've seen how seemingly disparate events, from post-war power struggles to modern geopolitical tensions, can be interpreted through the lens of this complex narrative. The core argument hinges on the idea of a hidden global power structure manipulating events for its own ends. A shadowy cabal pulling strings behind the scenes. It's a theory that challenges your understanding of history and current affairs, prompting you to question what you think you know. Remember, this isn't about accepting everything at face value. Critical thinking is key. You should analyze the evidence presented, consider alternative explanations, and form your own conclusions. The narrative presented here is just one interpretation, and it's up to you to decide how much weight you give it. It's a provocative idea, designed to spark discussion and encourage deeper investigation. Ultimately, understanding this narrative requires you to be aware of its inherent limitations. It's based on interpretations of historical events and contemporary observations, and these interpretations are always subject to revision. The information presented here should encourage you to explore further, to seek out diverse perspectives, and to develop your own informed opinion. Remember, the truth is often multifaceted and rarely simple. This isn't just about history, it's about you. It's about understanding the forces that shape our world and how those forces might influence your future. This video presents a perspective, a complex one, and it's up to you to decide how much weight you give it. Don't just passively consume information, actively question it. Develop your own critical thinking skills. Seek out diverse viewpoints, compare and contrast, and form your own informed conclusions. Engage with the world around you. Become an informed citizen. Don't rely solely on mainstream media. Explore independent sources, analyze the information presented, and understand the potential biases involved. The more you learn, the more equipped you'll be to navigate the complexities of global events and form your own opinions. Remember, critical thinking isn't about blindly accepting or rejecting any single narrative. It's about evaluating evidence, identifying biases, and forming your own well-reasoned opinions. It's about empowering yourself to participate actively in shaping your future and the future of the world. Don't be a passive observer. Be an engaged citizen. This was a heavy one, huh? If you found this insightful, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's mysteries. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments.